Coming up on your favorite podcast, it's the Power 5 Pod. Ryan is here. We're going to debate all kinds of stuff tonight, talking college football. I wouldn't even call it a debate, really. It's not that interesting. Who knows? But we're going to talk Clay Helton. He's out at USC, so who's going to take that job? My money's on a certain coach in the NFL right now. We'll talk about that. We'll also get into Ohio State losing, which has Ryan fuming. He's angry. We want to hear what he has to say about that. Plus, we've got some other stuff to look for in college football this week, so it should be an interesting pod. Stay tuned. It's time for the Power 5 Podcast. Next. Hey, it's the Tim Anderson Podcast. I'm Tim Anderson, and that is my buddy Ryan over there. Ryan Nelson Kane. Ryan, good to see you.
I'm good.
It's good having you here. Yeah, for sure. So much to get to. Much to get to. But first of all, we're podding tonight. We got just an ass load of pods coming your way in the next couple of days. We got the debut of the NFL Pod Season 2 tomorrow night with Zach and you, which should be contentious. It should be aggressive at times. And should be a ton of fun this season. I know that we've got some opinions after a wild first week of the NFL. And then Lauren comes by at the end of the week to talk about the next film in our Peak Cinema series.
For sure. Yeah, it'll be fun to get back in the swing of the full pod schedule. Looking forward to it. I know we're adding a couple with the college football pod, which is tonight, and we're gonna have a couple others there with the golf pod and the wrestling pod. So it'll be fun. I'm excited to get back in the full swing.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of the wrestling pod, I got to get my guy Rickert in here soon because there's a lot going on. There wasn't much to talk about in the world of pro wrestling, but with audiences back and all the CM Punk stuff, good Lord. We got things to talk about in the
Bryan
pro wrestling
Danielson.
Scene. Yeah, the Bryan Danielson news was big. Although, I'm a little concerned about that one. That one has me a little worried, I must admit.
Sounds like what's his name? Kevin Owens might be back.
Kevin Owens. Sounds like Bray Wyatt, I think the debut is imminent there. Yeah. So we will be interested to see where that goes. But I'm a big believer in competition. I think a rising tide lifts all boats. I expect that to be the case here.
For sure. I mean, it'll be fun to see. Obviously, this isn't Wrestling Pod, but I mean, it's
part of it, right?
Fun to watch.
Yeah, you got to talk about this stuff when it comes up. It's interesting stuff, and it's the first time that wrestling's been interesting in a while. We got to admit it. So let me start here. Where do you want to go? Do you want to talk Ohio State first, or do you want to talk Clay Helton first?
No,
I'm going to give you the option here. We're going to let you can ease it. We can rip the Band-Aid right now if you want.
Let's rip the Band-Aid.
Okay.
I think that's fine.
All right. Here we go. Ohio State lost on Saturday to Oregon. I think most people felt like until the Clay Helton news hit yesterday, that was probably the biggest story of the weekend. And it might still be. I guess I want to hear from you first. I have some thoughts. Where do you want to take this?
Well, I guess I'll give a quick review of the game, and I can kind of tell you what I thought, what I saw. I watched the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, it's disappointing as a Buckeye fan to see that happen. What I will say, just overview of my thoughts on it. If it's going to happen, I'd rather have it happen early and to that team in that spot, because ultimately it was a 7-point loss when you didn't play your best game to a pretty good Oregon team who really fixed a lot of the issues that they had in week 1 going into week 2. So if you're going to lose that game, don't lose to like Indiana later in the year, right? Get things fixed now with a loss that can look like a strong loss on a resume, rather than losing to a team on the road that you really shouldn't lose to. I thought the defense looked terrible for a good chunk of that game. Just on the edge, they just couldn't stop anybody. I thought that specifically playing in man coverage and getting caught in blitzes, when you know that they're going to run to the outside and not having a contain out there at all, no outside linebacker, no middle linebacker sweep, nothing from the corners or the safeties to run up and cover that gap. Just poor defense on that side. And then, obviously overcommit on fixing that, and you start giving stuff up through the air, just little pop throws and things like that. Just didn't look very good.
Yeah, continue.
Offensively, I thought that the offensive line really struggled. They didn't open the same holes that they did against Oregon that they could have. I thought that the timing looked off. The running game just never really took off. Passing-wise, obviously, they were fine. I mean, C.J. Stroud threw for 500 yards. It's the most that any Buckeye quarterback's ever thrown for in his second start as a 19-year-old freshman. Which, I mean, if you're a Buckeye fan and if you had questions at quarterback, I mean, really, outside of the first half of the last game, the last 6 quarters of football have largely answered that question. If C.J. Stroud can be the quarterback. I mean, obviously, he throws the pick at the end, but he's under pressure all night. He's running around. He's just trying to do something. And he's a 19-year-old freshman. He's going to make mistakes. You don't want to have to put the ball in his hands to go win the game this early in his career. The rest of the team really failed him, I thought. And I think that, my thoughts on Twitter were clear, at least, that I wanted to see some major changes out of the defense. It sounds like, anyway, that may be coming. That the focus of the media and the focus of the head coach today in his press conference was, we need to get this defense figured out. We need to get this defense fixed. So it's nice to know that that's where the attention's being paid, that the offense really isn't the issue. They've scored enough points to win both of these games, and the defense should have stepped up.
There is an obvious question here that comes from Ohio State. And maybe this is just me being, kind of the devil's advocate or whatever, but, are we sure Ryan Day's a good coach? Are we really sure?
I am. And I'll tell you why. His ability to make changes on the fly tells me that he's a good coach. He does a good job of making adjustments, being in the game and changing things. I mean, obviously the defense, he tries to step in and say things, but the defense isn't his thing, right? He's the head coach, but you hire a defensive coordinator, and the defensive coordinator's job is to make defensive adjustments. And he's an offensive coach, to say nothing of that, right? So he's an offensive guy. He focuses on the offense. The offense does its job. And he works with the defensive coordinator to call a defense. And it sounded like, anyway, on Saturday that he was running after Kerry Coombs and pushing for some changes. And they made some changes late in the game, and they started to look better. They got a couple of stops, but it was too little too late. So it does sound like he is taking more of an active role in the defense, but really he's an offensive coach. Now, I do think he's a good coach, though. You don't get to the college football playoff without being a good coach, regardless of the level of talent you have.
But, some guys are able to hide behind that a little bit. Mark Helfrich got a nice run at Oregon based on Chip Kelly's talent for a couple, 3-4 years, and then afterward it was he may not be that good a coach, right? It's just, he did it with Herb's guys. And it's still a factory of recruiting. He can still recruit guys. Because, again, there's nobody around him that can recruit to the level. I guess I'm a little bit... There's a few shaky losses on Ryan Day's resume. And this is one that, to me, you can't have. You can't have it. You haven't had a full house in the Horseshoe in a year and a half, 2 years. You have a hungry fan base that believes they're one of the 3 best teams in the country. You get a tough matchup, no question about it. No question. Oregon is a tough matchup. But at home, that's one you got to have, I think, right? Credit Mario Cristobal. I think he's done a really good job at Oregon, and he's doing a really good job. And that team is really strong. It's a stout little team. It's got to be had, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, but they're a good team, right? They are a good team. But what I think that when we talk about Ryan Day as a coach, right? Not just the team, because the team is the whole thing, right? There's specific things we can look at with a coach, and it's consistency, it's it's the ability that year in and year out to come in and get results. But I think that it's important to note that outside of the college football playoff, I think this was Ryan Day's first loss as the head coach in the regular season game. So for 3 years, he's been the head coach, right? So I guess it's technically 2.5 years. He's the head coach. He hadn't lost a game outside of the college football playoff.
Yeah, I'm not calling for his head. I'm not saying he should be fired or anything, or that this is a fireable loss. But I think it's okay to say, what's on his resume?
but I think as the coach of a program like Ohio State, with the caliber of teams that they're playing, and the importance that we know coaching is put, we know the amount of importance coaching has on a college football team, right? It's not the pros. The pros, it's a little bit less. There's a little bit of it, and it's more play calling, more position coaches, getting edges. But it's talent's going to win out in the NFL, talent scheme, right? But they all basically run the same stuff. In college, it's not the same way. In college, you're dealing with 18, 19, 20-year-old guys who, for better or for worse, aren't completely developed, don't have a great knowledge of the game. You're really doing more education than you are at the pro level. And for a guy to come in and have one loss, and it was this week in a schedule that Ohio State plays where they've played some really tough teams. I remember that Penn State game where they should have lost. I think it was 2018, and they didn't lose that game because Ryan Day made the adjustments at halftime to go back out there and beat Penn State in the whiteout, and they played a really good game. He consistently has his team ready to play football, and I think that they were ready to play football this week. I just don't think that the defense is doing what the defense needs to do. And that's the frustrating thing, I think, is we put too much importance on the quarterback position. We're talking a lot about the head coach, but the bottom line is that it was the defensive coordinator and the defense that didn't do their job. And he's the one that's pressing for that. He's the one that's making changes and calling the shots now. So I know Ryan Day is gonna get that fixed. But as an Ohio State fan, I got a lot of faith in Ryan Day.
So, that's encouraging. You don't think they're out of it, though. You believe that if they can run the table, things are going to happen, right? Those SEC teams are going to beat themselves up a little bit. You don't think you're not buying the Pac-12 yet, so you don't think this is over yet?
No, I certainly don't. Like I said, if you're going to lose a game, lose this one. Right? Number 12 ranked team in the country. They're going to go on a run and win a bunch of games this year. Oregon is one of the most talented teams in the country this year. And looking at Ohio State's schedule, they have an opportunity to rattle off some wins, right? The toughest game you've got left is really Penn State. And I believe that's at home in Columbus. Let me just look real quick.
Yeah.
Pull up their schedule. But I'm pretty sure that's the toughest game you got left. Your next four are at home against Tulsa, at home against Akron. You go to Rutgers, and then you're at home against Maryland. That to me, that's 4 wins. You're 5-1, right? You're still sitting in the top 10. Just put together some good showings, fix some of the problems on defense, and then you go on a run at the end of the year where you go on the road to play Indiana, an Indiana team that got shellacked by Iowa, and I think Ohio State is better than Indiana. Then you get Penn State at home. It's a big game, really your last big game of the year up until the Michigan game. But you're on the road to Nebraska. You're hosting Purdue and you're hosting Michigan State. And that Michigan State team is sneaky, but they really haven't played anybody yet.
They'll get a test this weekend. They play Miami this weekend, but that Michigan State team, I think it's a dangerous little team. I think they're interesting.
Yep, they play good defense and they run the ball really well, and that's kind of dangerous for Ohio State. But I still think you're at home. You beat Michigan State.
Yep, I agree.
If you beat Penn State and you can rattle off the rest of these wins, you go to the Big Ten title game. There isn't the only team that really scares you in the Big Ten West right now is Iowa, but Iowa always seems to fall off at some point, right? There seems to be a couple of games that they don't quite get up for, and then they fall apart. And I think that Iowa is a team that's beatable at a neutral site, especially. So your biggest challenges are Penn State, potentially Iowa, and if you run the table, you win the Big Ten. Your only loss is to an Oregon team that may already be in the playoff. So that to me says, yeah, you're going to have a shot at a playoff if you can run the table here. So just the way college football shakes out, that's what you want to see.
So you're not too worried. That's good to know. So you're not panicking yet. I was a little worried about you at first on Saturday. You're a lot calmer than I would. If we would have done the pod at 3:00 Saturday, where would your mindset have been?
Well, I was really upset. I thought that this is going to sound really haughty and kind of arrogant, but this is Ohio State, right? This isn't Minnesota. This isn't Purdue. This isn't the MAC. This is Ohio State football. And the level of play that I saw on Saturday was not requisite of Ohio State football. And you saw a number of alumni and NFL guys who went to Ohio State that were tweeting that over the weekend. Just like this isn't what we want to see. James Laurinaitis came out and flamed the defensive coach and said that this isn't silver bullets football. They're really not putting hits on anybody. They're not playing tough. And the question that's come up over the last couple of days is, if this doesn't get turned around, is that it for Ryan Day? Because he said they're sticking with Kerry Coombs for now. So, he's tying himself to Kerry Coombs, a guy who doesn't seem to be up to the job right now. So we'll see how that plays out for him. But sitting right above Ohio State in the rankings is a former Ohio State coach in Cincinnati who went to Ohio State and played for Ohio State. And if the job opened up, you've got a really good defensive coach sitting there in Luke Fickell, who, by all counts, would love to coach at Ohio State and wants to coach at Ohio State if that job ever opens up again. So if we get to a situation here where you don't play quite as well as you want, you lose to a Penn State, you lose to Michigan State, and you God forbid you lose to Michigan. You could see Ryan Day out of a job this year. So.
You really think so? You think it could go that off the rails that quickly?
Look, there are high expectations at Ohio State. This is a program that believes and should believe that they can compete with every program in the country. And you look around and you see a football program that seems to be playing softer and seems to be regressing a little bit. And you got to bring somebody in who knows that program, and not to say Ryan Day doesn't, but if you want to go back to the well and a guy who's a proven coach, hey, I think that Luke Fickell really rebuilt Cincinnati and brought them to be a top 10 program. Imagine what he could do at Ohio State. So, I think that he recruited all those guys. He clearly knows what he's doing. He knows how to recruit the state of Ohio, which is the biggest thing that you need to do if you're Ohio State. And now you have all the tools at your disposal. So I think the big thing for me is if Ryan Day loses to Michigan, right? If the 3,500 plus day streak of losing of beating Michigan, it's been almost 3,600 days since Michigan last beat Ohio State.
Think about that.
If that happens again, if that happens this year, if that streak is broken, I think it could cost Ryan Day his job.
Wow. Stay tuned for that. I think that's doomsday, worst case scenario. I think they're miles away from that unless they really think Luke Fickell is somebody they become really interested in, which kind of brings us to our next topic a little bit, and that's Clay Helton out at USC.
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear, first of all, your thoughts on the firing, and then I'll kind of share mine, and then we'll kind of look at who might be a good fit there.
Well, you got to do it, right? If you are USC, you have to do it. The showing that they put up against Stanford this week was abysmal. It was atrocious. It was one of the worst college football performances I've seen from a Power 5 program in the nearly 30 years that I've been watching college football. I don't know how to describe this fall of a program from USC. This to me, USC's failure to get back on the college football map, to me, is akin to if Alabama was irrelevant in 10 years. Right? If Alabama was perennially talked about as a team that was back on the rise and was unranked almost every single year, but this could be the year they jump back. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Right?
If 10, 15 years ago, Mike Shula or the Mike Dubose era or something like that, because I think they thought that with Mike Shula forever. They did give him life before they hired Nick Saban, right? A lot of people forget about that Alabama was in this sort of irrelevant area, right, for a stretch, that they were kind of waiting for this.
And you know what's funny is when that was happening was when USC was dominant, right? That 2000 to 2010, that first decade of the new century, USC, shouldn't say 2010. I think it was 2008, 2009 was the last time they were really good. But that 8-year stretch, USC dominated college football.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? They they took him away from them, which was BS, but they won 2 titles, right? They had 2 Heisman winners in a row. They had, I think, for my money, and I know old timers might disagree with me on this, but for my money, Reggie Bush is the greatest college football player to ever play in the NCAA.
Very good. I mean, I can make a case a little bit for a guy like Vince Young or Trevor Lawrence. Tim Tebow. Tebow probably comes to mind a little bit more. But I love Reggie Bush.
Reggie Bush was absolutely electric. You talk about guys who every time they touch the ball, they're a threat to score, right? There are those guys, right? Yeah, sure. There's, and it's sometimes it's said with, kind of the understanding, well, of course they're gonna run for 3 yards in a cloud of dust here and there. Reggie Bush was legitimately, there was something happening on every play. And he was just able to do things that we haven't seen since Barry Sanders played college football, right? And it was, I put those two on kind of the same level on the collegiate level, right? Never really got to the same heights in the pros for Reggie Bush. He had a lot of injuries, but in college, the guy was an absolute. He was like a god. You just couldn't touch him. And that's what USC was. So to see them kind of fall off like this is a little disheartening to me. I used to love watching SC football. I had, it was really around a time when Ohio State was pretty good. I had kind of hoped that, that 06, 07, 08 time when Ohio State was playing for championships, that they might have a shot at playing against like a USC. But it was really, those Florida LSU teams that we ended up clashing with. So
it was really, you're right about that. USC was just prime time. I mean, you got to think about it too. It's a little bit different now because there was no NFL team at that time, and Carroll was the coach, and I think everybody got really excited about USC football. You wonder if it's a different animal now with 2 teams in LA and Chip Kelly being kind of the box office coach at UCLA and looking like maybe that thing's starting to move in the right direction. You wonder, I still think USC is a big-time job. Here's my complaint, and maybe you could tell me I'm wrong. You fire him 1 loss into the season. Now, I grant you, and I'm with you 100%, it was not a good loss to Stanford. I watched that game. I really thought they got outplayed from Jump Street. David Shaw just outcoached Clay Helton the entire way.
Which is inexplicable.
And David Shaw's a good coach. But he's a good coach. David Shaw's a good football coach. But is he that much better than Clayton? I don't know. I don't know about that. I think the bloom is a little off the David Shaw rose, right? I think he had a chance to cash in the NFL like 4 years ago and didn't take it. But I wonder if that's what he wanted. I don't know. But I look around though, and I think to myself, if your leash was 1 loss, doesn't matter how bad the loss was. If the leash is 1 loss, then why not just fire him last year when clearly you didn't want him back? Clearly he wasn't your guy. And you let him recruit for an entire offseason. You let him have another training camp. You let him start the season. And now there are more Clay Helton players on the team. Even if you hire a coach in January last year, you get some chances to start at least changing the culture, bringing different coaches in. Clearly, Herb wanted to coach. That's why he took the Jacksonville job. Why didn't you make a phone call? Even in a clandestine way, go behind the scenes secretly and see if he had interest and make a pitch. But it seemed like they were married to Clay Helton when they weren't.
Yeah, I don't know why you give him another shot.
We saw the rumors last year, didn't we? Didn't they talk about it weekly that Helton was out? We thought that was fait accompli.
Yeah, no, I agree. We definitely said that every week last year, that we weren't sure when Clay Helton or if Clay Helton was going to hold on to that job. I honest to God, have no idea why they kept him for another year. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me why you keep a guy like that for a year, like you said. But for my money, I would say that Clay Helton's leash may have been longer than a loss if he didn't just look so absolutely buffoonish losing that way, right? The meme that came out of that game was him standing mouth agape looking at the scoreboard just not knowing what was going on. And if you're USC, if a guy loses a game and he loses it badly, but he's able to come up with an explanation, like that's one thing for me, right? Like the leash may stay where the leash was, but that leash is going to get significantly shorter if you're not able to explain what it is you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. And it just seemed to me that at the end, Clay Helton just was out of answers. He just had nothing left.
It's very possible, when coaches get that baffled look, and by the way, maybe flip the gain just a touch, got a little static hit that comes in every once in a while. I don't know if that's on your end or my end, but I'm working on it over here. A little technical issue on the pod. But it's a great question, right? Maybe the leash would have been longer. And yes, as soon as you see the baffled look, I call it the Ted Catrel look. Whenever you get the Ted Catrel baffled, I have no idea what's happening look, it's usually not a good sign. That's usually the first sign that things are going to go south. Ryan might be too young to remember the Ted Catrel days in Minnesota as the defensive coordinator, but I felt like every time the Vikings would give up touchdowns notoriously, they'd pan to the sidelines. Ted Catrel looked like he was punch drunk on the sidelines with no answers. And that's what Clay Helton looked like. But again, I'm trying to figure out what the upside is, or what the end game is for USC on this. If you're going to fire the coach 2 games in, it's almost like a white flag, because you're not expecting the coach that they've asked to fill in to lead them. This isn't an Ed Orgeron situation where he filled in for Sarkisian and they were competitive and they hung in there. This is a guy who has no coaching or coordinating experience. I don't think they're thinking he's going to have this job. So this isn't it's a white flag on the season, but what's the end game here? Is it because you need a head start?
Well, I don't even know if it's because you need a head start. I'm wondering if maybe it's if it's an issue of we just need to part ways with this guy, right? Like I wonder if maybe the problem that they're running into is we just don't have an answer for what it is that this guy's trying to do. And it gets really hard to recruit, and you want to get your new staff in there as soon as possible to start recruiting, right? You can't go another year with this guy's recruits. It's clear that it's just not working. So I think you call it quits. I think you put them on the shelf and say good luck to you in your future endeavors and move on from there. But I don't think that I don't know that it's rushing it. I think it was a good move to get him out. Now you've got a chance to go, get yourself an interim, say it's a lost season, and go hire a new guy and say, we're gonna give you what we can give you, and this is all we got.
I guess that brings us to this piece. I think there's like 5 or 6 guys that come to mind as people that you have to make phone calls to, but I wonder if your list is the same as mine for USC. Who's the first guy you have to call if you're USC?
A lot of people are going to say Urban Meyer.
That was exactly who I was going to say.
I don't know that that Urban Meyer would be on my list for this job.
It's pretty clear that he's not an NFL coach, though, right? I understand it was just one game. But you start hearing some of the reports out there from Jason La Canfora, and I'll talk about this tomorrow night on the NFL pod. But there's reports out there that he's tough to do. Like he's hard on assistants. He's very much a college coach, and he's threatening job security on assistant coaches and players after preseason losses and things like that. Like he hates losing and can't handle it. There's a little part of me that feels like he's 3-10 in Bobby Petrino. Don't you get that vibe a little bit?
Yeah, maybe. I guess that makes sense to me. I can't say that I can't see it coming. I just don't know that. I don't know that his style would fit with what USC wants to do. Also, I'm not certain that if he comes back, he's going to come back to a program like SC. I think if he comes back to a college football program, it's going to be a program that is going to compete for a title right away. Maybe a retirement. Maybe somebody decides that a school decides it's time for a new direction, or somebody resigns or steps down. Right. Honestly, and it may or may not be likely at all, he could hold out until Nick Saban decides to retire and throw his hat in the ring for the Alabama job if he wants it.
I don't think he would ever want to follow Nick Saban.
LSU may have a coaching opportunity at the end of the year here this year that Urban Meyer would be, I think, way more likely to jump at than USC. I don't think that he's the type of guy who's going to jump at his first option, because every school is going to have him down as the first option as long as he's out there.
You feel like if you're USC, you have to be told no by him, though, right?
I think so, but I don't know that you're going to get an answer from him before the end of the NFL season. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Maybe.
I think that if you're looking at programs that are going to have open coaching spots, if you know that LSU may have an opening and you can go coach in the SEC at a top flight program that won a title 3 years ago, then I'm thinking you're probably going to go to LSU, right? And Urban Meyer could go have success at LSU.
Hell, if I'm USC, maybe I call Ed Orgeron. He was already the interim there once. He likes USC. He hates the sissy blue shirts at UCLA. I don't know, but he's not my first choice. Obviously, Herb's my first choice. I have to be told no. I have to be told no by Urban Meyer. No question about it.
I see what you're saying. I think for me, I'm down to two guys, and it's not Urban Meyer. I think that it's Matt Campbell from Iowa State.
Yep.
And I had the other guy, and
it's Luke Fickell, right?
Luke Fickell, that was it. Thank you. At Cincinnati, there were some rumors of him today, potentially being available for that job and wanting that job. Now, if the rumor does say that if Luke Fickell is going to sign a contract right now, he is going to leave the door open to potentially going to the Ohio State job. That's
see, and that's my only fear about a guy like Luke Fickell is you're hiring a guy whose heart's already somewhere else.
Right.
And that's a bit of a see, at least Cincinnati makes sense for him. It's close enough. He's building a winner. It's his too, by the way. It's his program. He's not inheriting something. He built that. He's building that. Brian Kelly had a good run at Cincinnati, but they went on they had that run in the middle. And I think Luke Fickell's done a great job. And clearly he wants to coach in Ohio. Clearly. I don't know if that's exciting. Matt Campbell, I think, has maxed out at Iowa State. I don't think there's any question about that. I don't know if you can get much higher than where they were these last couple of weeks, but I'm a little concerned that they didn't handle the prosperity. I guess here's the thing. I have to be told no by Urban, and I have to be told no by Bob Stoops. Your thoughts?
Bob Stoops is an interesting thought. I think that Bob Stoops, to me, would be a great fit at USC. Big game Bob could step back in there, get the recruiting started with competing for those Southern California recruits. And part of the trouble of being an SC program that has fallen off is you're not just losing those recruits to UCLA, Cal, Stanford, and everyone in the Pacific Northwest. You are losing those guys to national programs, right? Your best players aren't going to UCLA or SC anymore. They're going to Ohio State. They're going to Florida. They're going to LSU, Alabama, Texas, Oklahoma. They're getting spread across the country. What you need is a coach who understands how to lock down a recruiting area and build relationships with those high school coaches and say, this is SC territory again. We need to get these guys to stay in town to show that this is the best that Southern California can offer. And I think that's one of the things that Pete Carroll did so well when he was there was he could recruit nationally, but they didn't lose the best guys from LA, right? And there's a lot of talent that comes out of that LA area. There's just so many students every year, and there's always going to be athletic talent. So now you've got to form relationships with those coaches. You've got to form relationships with the Rams and the Chargers and turn it into a national brand again. Make it it was kind of, when I was in high school, it was kind of swaggy to wear some SC gear, right? You walk around, you've got the SC hat, the Trojans hat in that cursive script that they had. That was kind of a swagger thing that you did. Some people would get it with the Dodgers blue and white.
Yeah.
And they kind of had like the SC Dodgers sort of combo on there. If you can have that again, right? That sort of, people come to SC because we're SC, right? You got to have that again. And I think Bob Stoops is a guy who could bring that to you. I think Urban Meyer, if you're going after him, you're looking to say we need to recruit more nationally. Bob Stoops can do that, but I think Bob Stoops is a better local recruiter than Urban Meyer was.
And that's the thing. Like if you're a school like SC and you are a blue blood and you're a national power, like to me, if you want to stay in that position, or that's what you're upset about, you're upset that you're not considered a big name thing, right? Then to me, you have to swing big. Like you have to take big swings here. You can't do what Florida. I mean, I'm not rooting against Mike Norvell at Florida State because I think Mike Norvell's a good coach, although it didn't look like it last Saturday. But
or the Saturday before.
Or the Saturday before. You can't miss. You can't miss. And UCLA found this out. Like, I don't think Karl Dorrell was a bad coach, but Karl Dorrell didn't have cachet, right? He wasn't able to move the needle. And wasn't able to bring those players in. Now Chip Kelly's starting to do that.
Florida State has the benefit of having a guy waiting in the wings just down the road at Jacksonville, right? Like I think it's Jacksonville, wherever Deion Sanders is coaching.
Jackson State.
At Jackson State, where he's the next guy at Florida State.
Do you think so? Really?
Yeah, 100%.
Really?
And you know what? Here's what I think is going to be great about that. I think about like in the mid '80s, you had those Miami teams that he was on.
Yeah.
That were just all about, I want a bunch of superstars. They don't have to like each other. They don't have to get along. But we're going to be just the baddest dudes out here. We're going to just swag on them the entire time, right? Gold chains and rap music and nice cars. And now you've got the NIL stuff.
But you still got to scheme. You still got to scheme something.
Sure. Absolutely.
Do we know if he can scheme yet?
And I think that as the head coach of a program like Miami, you've had guys that have succeeded like this before, right? Not necessarily football guys. You know what I mean? Or Florida State, I mean. Not necessarily football guys, but guys who know how to delegate and they hire good coaches, right? And those good coaches coach up other good coaches. And now you've got a tree. And I think that all he has to do is have the knowledge of one part of the game to be successful. Excuse me. I had to sneeze there. No, I think that if he can get a good coaching staff around him and he goes to Florida State, I think you could build a legitimately good program just surrounding, we're gonna bring all of these personalities from Florida to Florida State, and we're just gonna build just an empire of dudes, right? A bunch of guys who are great at football, who are going to go to the NFL, who are coming to Florida State to build their brand around being, working with Coach Deion.
Let me tie this back. Let me tie this back to Helton a little bit in USC. Is there somebody that maybe is like a Deion Sanders type, a UCLA alum or a USC alum? I mean, something that could have that as a hire at USC.
I don't know if they could have it as a hire right now, but you've got to start bringing guys like Reggie Bush back in, right? You got to bring Snoop to the games. You gotta have Jack Nicholson sideline, right? But you get what I mean, right? Like this is how you build a program in LA, is you bring LA to the program, right? And that's how you're successful. It's the same way you'd be successful at Florida State, right? It's the same way you'd be successful at Miami. And look, when Ohio State's at their best, look who's on the sideline. It's LeBron James, right? When they're in big spots, when they've got big recruiting weekends with a ton of kids coming, LeBron James is in the stadium. Yeah. And LeBron James is on the sideline. And those kids see LeBron's going to come watch me play football, right? Reggie Bush is watching me play football, right? The legacy of the program is here. You know what I mean? Like there are guys like that for SC. There are a ton of guys like that for SC who could come back and say, yeah, this is SC football. you're going to have Hollywood stars coming out and watching you. If you can get some of those just gorgeous actresses out there and just sit them on the front line of that student section, or right behind the bench where those recruits are going to sit, and just line them up, right? Use LA. And I think you need to find a coach who's willing and able to do that.
That makes me wonder about going to the NFL. Obviously, I think, again, I'm going to reiterate. I think you have to ask Herb. You have to ask Bob Stoops. You have to. Got to start there. But then you start to look around. Like, USC took a chance on Pete Carroll, who had been fired out of the NFL, but had energy, was maybe a college coach at heart. You look at, Arizona State's had success with Herm Edwards, who was the same kind of thing. A coach that was kind of a middling coach in the NFL, had some success, not a ton, but a good coach and a dynamic personality. Who
comes to mind for that, though?
There's who comes? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Who's that guy that at least you throw that option out there, because that has been proven to be a successful model.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Rex Ryan?
I don't know if Rex Ryan at SC would be a good fit.
No, probably not. But you know what I'm talking about, though, right?
Yeah,
that guy,
good personality.
That guy that has that kind of, or is there the coordinator that we're missing? Although, can you do that? Could you hire Eric Bieniemy?
I think you could if he wants the job. I think other than him, interestingly enough, if he loses his job this year, Zach Taylor would make an interesting fit for SC.
Yeah.
Kind of a young upstart dude. He's not real wild, though. You know what I mean? He doesn't have a ton of personality.
Yeah, you need energy, and there's got to be cachet in the hire. Because at the very least, if you hired a guy like, I'm not going to say Jim Harbaugh, but if you hire somebody like, I'm just going to throw this out there. Say the Steelers at the end of the year part ways with Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin's dynamic, right? That's cachet. There's money attached to that. That's what you want. You need a name. At least at the very least with Pete Carroll, you hired him when you were at your lowest at USC. You weren't even a brand anymore. But you hired him because, you know what, we're rolling the dice. Same thing with Arizona. You roll the dice and you get Herm Edwards, and look what's happened. Now you're a top 25 program and you're back a little bit. So I just think if you're USC, you need to swing big. And that's where Luke Fickell, I think Luke Fickell's a great coach, and he's going to be a head coach anywhere he wants after being at Cincinnati. Is that enough in LA?
I wonder if this is a guy who makes some sense. A fiery guy, young guy. He's producing one of the best defenses in college football right now. I wonder if you don't call Brian Leonard at Wisconsin.
Do you think Wisconsin has enough cachet, though, to hire a guy like that?
I think a former NFL safety who was very good at his position and has putting together one of the best defenses in college football. I think he's a guy you can put out there and say, this is the guy. Take a chance on a young guy who can stick with your program and build your program and build it into a brand again for the next 15, 20 years if he wants.
I know Zach threw out PJ Fleck, and I think that's only because Zach wants to see PJ go away.
I think you're probably right.
But
putting him at SC doesn't make him go away, though. It makes it worse.
But it gets him out of his backyard, which might be the only reason for that one. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. You might be right.
So we got to keep an eye on this, right? I just think it's going to be a big swing job, and you do have time. You're the first team out, basically, besides Connecticut, but that doesn't matter.
No one's watching Connecticut football.
So go ahead and use. You don't have to be clandestine about it. That's the whole thing too. You can be frontal in your overtures, right? You can you can make phone calls all over the place and say we're open for business. I'm assuming that means they want to get their guy by the end of November, right? Don't you think? We get into bowl season, they want somebody to say yes before that bowl season hits.
I think maybe that could be the case. I don't know, to be honest. Their strategy is a bit of a mystery to me here at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that there's going to be a number of questions that they want to have answered before they hire somebody. And I don't know that you're going to want to hire somebody before you run through the list of guys who might be available at the end of the year. it's an important decision. It's one you're making for the next 3-4 years. So I'm just not certain that I'm not certain they're going to make a decision very quickly.
You might be right about that. So we'll keep an eye on that. That was a big story, obviously. The rest of the week was actually pretty. It wasn't ho-hum. I wouldn't call it that. But it was. You know, it was the week where there wasn't a ton of marquee matchups last week. But still, there were some interesting results. Anything stick out to you besides the Ohio State game and Clay Helton?
Iowa State for sure.
Yeah. Although I thought Iowa was going to win that game from Jump Street. I thought they were the better team heading in. I wasn't sold on Iowa State.
I don't know that I was sold on Iowa State, but I thought it would be closer than it was. Other than that, I mean, the Michigan Washington game was supposed to be a good game, but I mean, Washington really looked bad week 1, and then they really just didn't do anything to build on that at all in week 2. Got beat 31-10. I mean, it's other than that, I'm trying to think of an interesting one. Miami almost losing to Appalachian State. That one was an interesting game. Texas Arkansas. That's one we were talking about last week.
That's the one that one that sticks out to me. That's the shocker, I think, to a certain extent. Not that Texas lost, because I think we thought that was possible. You know, in SEC country, in a full house at Fayetteville, I think we thought that was possible, especially early in the Sarkisian administration. But to see them get handled like that, I don't think anybody saw that coming.
Yeah, you're right. I think the other one that sticks out to me is for the second week in a row, Notre Dame nearly loses to a very inferior opponent. They only won by 3 points over Toledo this week. And they were down for a good chunk of that game. So I don't know your thoughts on Notre Dame football, but they really don't seem to be in a very good year this year.
They've been in a couple of pillow fights here, right? I mean, that Florida State win looks less and less interesting.
Yep.
And they had a fight on their hands last Saturday. I mean, it took everything they had. It was a good thing it was on Peacock and nobody could watch it. Yeah. I mean, Jesus, it was a mess.
And it doesn't get any easier for them either. I mean, they play Purdue, Wisconsin, Cincinnati, Virginia Tech. Those are their next 4 games.
They got to figure some things out quickly.
If you're taking Toledo and Florida State to the wire, you might beat Purdue, but you're not beating Wisconsin, Cincinnati, and Virginia Tech. You also pull because you play USC on October 23rd. Obviously USC, as we've discussed for the last 30 minutes or so, just is not a program that you're fearing right now. But then you get North Carolina, Navy, Virginia, and Georgia Tech, and those are tough games.
That's a tough schedule. It really is. I mean, and Notre Dame always does play a fairly tough schedule, to their credit. But they're not. I mean, there's going to be a couple games there where they might be favored, but it won't be by a lot. I don't know if I could favor them over Vatech right now.
Right. No, I don't think that I could either. Maybe North Carolina, if I'm going to pick a ranked game that they might be favored in.
Yeah.
But that's about the only one.
I mean, Wisconsin's going to be a freaking slobber knocker. I mean, they better pack a lunch. That's going to be a hard game.
I think Wisconsin's just going to beat the crap out of Notre Dame. They're going to have a really hard time with that game.
Yeah, the Notre Dame story is interesting. We're going to have to keep an eye on them. The big game, obviously, this week, Ryan, is Florida-Alabama, right? 1 versus 11.
Yep.
And we got to find, we found out Miami was kind of fraudulent when they played Alabama because Alabama beat the shit out of them.
Yeah.
Is Florida a fraud too, or can Florida give them a better game?
Florida can fly a little bit. I mean, they have a couple of quarterbacks who are pretty good. They can throw the ball up and down the field. They had an injury last week to I think Anthony Richardson is his name. Is the quarterback that got hurt. Tweaked his knee, didn't look very good. I mean, but he's a running guy. He can. The things that I've read about him are that he's wearing number 15 and he's playing a lot better than Tim Tebow did. So if that's the case, that's gonna be pretty good for the Florida Gators moving forward.
Them's fighting words. You got to be careful with that stuff.
But you look around at who they're playing this week and beyond, and man, I just don't know. I don't see how they beat an Alabama team that just looks as good as this Alabama team does.
If Alabama wins this game by like 3 touchdowns, I think you board it up. Like, I think it's over. I think that's a wrap. I mean, I don't know if anybody beats them.
You know, it's really interesting to me, and this gets into, you know, kind of a conspiracy land, so bear with me for a second.
Oh, boy.
It's really interesting to me, the parallels that this season has to 2014. You know, in 2014, from an Ohio State perspective, right? In 2014, Ohio State really wasn't expected to compete for a national title. They did eventually win it. They had quarterback questions coming in. You know, JT Barrett was a young quarterback in 2014. He was a freshman who was going to end up getting the start because Braxton Miller got hurt in the preseason, tore his knee up. You know, you have defensive questions. They're really not certain, you know, how the defense is going to play, especially at linebackers and in the secondary. And the first couple of games, first few weeks, they don't look very good. They lose to Virginia Tech on the road, in you know, an unranked Virginia Tech team, and there's everybody says Ohio State's cooked. They don't look very good. You know, we don't think that they're going to go anywhere. And all year, Alabama was the team to beat. Right, it was going to be Alabama-Oregon. That was going to be the national title game. Was Alabama-Oregon, was what everybody was looking forward to. We just had to play through the playoff. It was all a formality, and Ohio State put it together late in the year. They really did. They beat Michigan. They blew them out. They beat Penn State in a comeback game. They blew out Wisconsin 51-0 in the college football playoff, and then they came onto the scene with a really good offensive line, a veteran offensive line, a young running back in Ezekiel Elliott, and a freshman quarterback, and trounced Alabama in that Sugar Bowl game and ended up winning a national title. And there's a lot of similarities between that team and this team, and that season and this season. That it for whatever reason, I can't explain it to you, it feels a lot like that year.
I knew this was going to get worked back to Ohio State somehow. I just knew it. I knew you were going to go there. I knew it.
Of course.
A man with a tinfoil hat never takes it off. I mean, that's just how. So we'll have to wait. That's clearly the marquee matchup. That's a big prove-it game. I need to see Florida. By the way, it just hit me. One last thought on USC. Any odds they meet Lane Kiffin at the airport and they hire him? They say, They said, I know we fired you on the tarmac. What if we hired you back on the tarmac?
There's no way they're hiring Lane Kiffin again.
Do you have to make the phone call? I feel like you got to make the phone call.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
You have to make the phone call. I would do it. I would do it. I would olive branch it. I would show up in Oxford and I would say, here we are on the airport tarmac. And we're here to make amends. It's like a romantic comedy. It comes right back.
I don't think that ends the way you want it to end.
Seriously, cue up Ryan Reynolds. Get him in there. It would make $1 million. Make $100 million.
I don't think that ends the way you want it to end, boss.
You don't think Lane Kiffin accepts that and goes, I knew you'd come back. They always come back. No?
The old Bill Clinton. I knew you'd be back.
I knew you'd be back. Oh my God. I just am thinking about that. I'm like, you know what? I've seen stranger bedfellows in this life. Like, would you have ever thought Jon Gruden would have went back to the Raiders? I mean, come on. There's always something. Always.
By the way, and I know we'll get into this tomorrow night on the pod. Here's a little preview for you. I watched that Raiders team last night. They were lucky to win that game. They were not good enough to win that game. They took advantage of a Baltimore hospital squad, and it was clear that Baltimore was missing some guys. They did not look up to snuff last night. But I don't buy the Raiders. I don't think that the Raiders are going to be really any good. I had them winning less than 6 games this year, so I think I stick by that. That they're 6 and under for me. But we'll talk more about that tomorrow.
Absolutely. I'm just throwing it out there. Lane Kiffin. You might have to at least make a phone call.
I don't buy it. I'm not with you on that one. Sorry.
Do you think Kiffin would rather go back to L.A. and take a run at USC or stay at Mississippi?
I think he'd rather stay at Mississippi, to be honest with you. Now he's in the SEC.
Mississippi sucks. They're never going to beat Alabama. Never going to beat LSU. Never going to get on that level of Georgia. It's never going to happen.
We don't know, man. We don't know.
Maybe. You might be right.
He could get there.
We'll see. I'm going to throw a couple of games at you that I think are interesting. Sure. And I just want to kind of hear your quick thoughts here as we kind of go in the last few minutes. One of the games I'm interested in, I think Michigan State looks dangerous. They're unranked, but I kind of like them. And they take on Miami this week on the road. I think Miami's a fraud. I just don't think they're that good. I think Michigan State wins this game. Am I wrong?
I think that I think you're probably right, but Miami's a talented team, and while I don't think they were as good as they were originally ranked, I do think that they're a team that's on the rise. And those are teams that are dangerous when they start to get down. They could put something together here. I think Derek King is a veteran quarterback who knows what he's looking for, who knows what he's looking at. I don't think he's great by any stretch, but he's a quarterback who can be dangerous, especially with his feet. And if Michigan State gets a little cocky, starts pulling themselves out of the assignment areas where they need to be, I think this could be a game that could easily go Miami's way. I expect Michigan State to win. I don't expect them to blow them out.
Should be an interesting one. Michigan State's not ranked. It's very interesting to me. I think Mel Tucker's going to do a good job there. I don't know. I just got a vibe. I feel good about what they're doing. All right. Auburn, Penn State, 22 versus 10. A lot of people are kind of looking at Auburn as thinking, like, here's the SEC opportunity to blow out the Big Ten. I think Penn State's got something. And if they win this game, I think James Franklin's name starts to get poked around a little bit more when you start talking about places like USC. I like Penn State to win this game, win a tough guy game, in a 17-10 kind of tough guy game, don't you think?
I think that I'm taking Penn State in a blowout here.
Really, a blowout? Wow.
I think that Penn State is one of the most underrated teams in the country, even at 10. I think they're a team that can obviously challenge Ohio State for their spot in the Big Ten East and potentially for the Big Ten title and end up in the playoff this year. I don't know if that's going to happen. Obviously, you've got a lot of time and football between now and then, but I don't buy Auburn. I don't buy Auburn's defense. I don't buy Auburn's offensive line, and those are two strengths you have to have against a Penn State team that's going to grind the rock and they're going to pop the ball over your head. And look. Penn State's passing game isn't the greatest, and they abused a Wisconsin defense that I think is one of the best in the country. They abused them. They made an aggressive defense kind of cowed. They weren't able to play their game for the last 2 quarters of the game because they were just getting beat over the top every time they tried to bring any kind of pressure. It was remarkable the things that Penn State was able to do to Wisconsin's defense, and I think that they're probably going to be looking at doing the same thing to Auburn's defense. I don't think that Auburn's very good.
All right, last one on this one. I got a couple more, actually. Arizona State, BYU, 19 versus 23. I think Herm Edwards has done a good job, but this win is kind of a needed win, right? I mean, it's not that they don't have signature wins, but you do feel like if they want to enter the national conversation, especially in the Pac-12, you got to have this one.
I think you do, too. I don't think you get it against BYU. I think that's a really, really strong BYU program, and they're a strong BYU team. I don't know that they're as good as they were for the last couple of years with Zach Wilson, but they're a team that's going to be there, and they're going to give a lot of teams a lot of trouble. I don't know that Arizona State is quite there.
You might be right. It's definitely going to be a tough test. But I definitely think the Herm Edwards thing has gone better than I thought. I thought when they made this hire that it was going to be like a weird hire, and I didn't think it was going to work. It's worked better than I thought. Like for Arizona State, it was a gamble that's paying off.
For sure.
Good job by them. Last one. The Fighting Chip Kellys, UCLA. They take on a tough Fresno State team. Now, they're at home. I don't love the fact that UCLA has already jumped to number 13 in the rankings. Now, granted, you beat LSU. This is what happens. And I think getting the week off last week might have been the greatest thing that ever happened to them because it gives them a chance to get over the potential hangover factor.
Yep.
But Fresno State's a little frisky. I'm a little scared by this one. I still think UCLA wins this game, but I'm definitely intrigued by it for Pac-12 After Dark.
I am taking Fresno State in this game.
Wow.
Fresno State took it to Oregon at home, nearly beat Oregon. They look like a really good football team. And you know what? I think this could be the game that puts their quarterback on the map as who I think might be the best quarterback in the country. Fresno doesn't play. They are going to take it to UCLA. If UCLA is not absolutely 100% on their game, they're going to lose this game. And if they're not on their game from jump, this is a game they could lose badly and be embarrassed by this loss.
Wow. I think it's a slugfest. I think they're going to have their hands full early. I think they're going to find a way to win. I like what Chip Kelly's doing. I think he's. I really do think he's figuring it out there, and I mean, I think that adds to the USC drama. If UCLA keeps winning with Chip Kelly, I think the urgency for USC will go up 20 times.
100%.
There's no doubt this is an arms race right now, and Chip is trying to make it that way. And USC just reined it in and said our general's not good enough. It's not better than the guy across the hall who's going to get more guys than us.
Yeah, but you hope that if you're UCLA, you're hoping against all hope that this isn't the switch to US Grant. You know what I mean? Because that's what you're worried about at this point. That they're going to go out there and they're going to find their guy, and he's going to be the guy for the next 15 years. And it's going to be him and Chip Kelly. And you know what? I think as upsetting as that would be for UCLA to get their thunder stolen by that, I really do think it'd be really good for college football to have a true rivalry on the West Coast again.
100%. And you got to give it. I think that's the lesson. That's why I don't think it's a Luke Fickell that gets the job or a Matt Campbell that gets the job at USC, because UCLA took a big swing. They swung for an NFL coach that just got fired, who had a college resume.
True.
And they made an offer and they made it work. I think something like that's out there. I do. It'll be an interesting thing to watch. Oh, Ryan, another week of college football coming up on the horizon. It's a lot. I mean, I watched a lot of football this last weekend with the NFL being in full swing. Goodness gracious.
100%.
How are we going to stay energized?
It's a great question. You know what? More football does it for me.
Oh, folks, I want to thank you for continuing to listen to the podcast. Once again, I threw it out there this week. If you want to make a theme song for us, 10 to 15 seconds, that would be sweet. Send it to me. I'd love to hear from you. Continue to share us out. Continue to like us, comment, all that stuff, and get our audience as big as we can get it. There's going to be things that we're going to do to try to boost our audience up as well. Lots of stuff going on. So I continue to thank you for the support you give, and I want to continue to ask for that support as we go forward. So that'll be that. Look for more podcasts this week. It's a busy week. I got to go rest my voice. Time to go get a lozenge. We got a long way to go. Rhino, thank you, my friend.
Oh, yeah. Good to talk to you.
Oh, absolutely. And for Ryan and everybody else who comes on this podcast every once in a while, this is me, Tim, saying keep your head up, and we'll see you next time.